CEO brings nanny to exclusive gala. Her amazing, unexpected actions revealed an incredible secret. Michelle adjusted the simple silk dress she wore, trying to blend in beneath the cascading crystal chandeliers. She had spent over a decade caring for the CEO's children, but this gala felt like an alien world, an elite society of insincere smiles and superficial conversations. The clinking of glasses echoed around her, each sound magnified by the cacophony of laughter and high-pitched banter. Her heart raced as she took a hesitant sip of soda, feeling woefully out of place amidst the titans of the tech world. As she leaned against the wall, her eyes wandered over the crowd. That chipper feeling she had about being part of the family melted away as she overheard two executives whispering behind their overflowing glasses of champagne. They spoke of shady dealings, money swaps, and the cost employees paid for the CEO's ambition. A sinking feeling gripped her stomach. The truth was slipping like sand through her fingers, and the impression of loyalty felt like shards of glass cutting into her heart. For years, she was the protector of those innocent kids, always putting their needs above all else. But was the CEO, whom she revered, finally tugging at something darker, a world that could jeopardize the lives of the struggling workers who gave so much just to keep the machine running? Panic coursed through her, leaving her both resolute and uneasy. What if she remained silent? The innocent would remain crushed beneath the weight of ambition, and it would be her quiet complicity that allowed their suffering to continue. Questions spiraled within her mind. Was the life she'd built worth sacrificing the truth? The gravity of this choice bore down on her. Her years of nurturing the children had created a bond that sometimes felt like family. But did family extend to unquestioned loyalty, especially when integrity was on the line? As their laughter rang hollow around her, she couldn't shake the tension in her chest. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let us continue. Tension crackled in the air as she watched the CEO weave through the throng, effortlessly charming guests. But as he passed, Michelle's unease evolved into defiance. She felt the call to speak out burning in her gut, a fire against the fear that gripped her like a shackle. Adrenaline surged as she stepped forward, surprising herself as she called out to him. "Sir, have you thought about the consequences of your actions?" Her voice, steady and clear despite the tremors in her hands. Eyes turned, conversations paused, laughter faded. Even the sparkle of champagne flutes dimmed in the electric atmosphere. The CEO's face hardened, his expression shifting dramatically. A flicker of irritation crossed his face, transforming into something more sinister as he leaned in. "You don't want to make this an issue, Michelle," he whispered, his voice ice cold. She felt the gravity of his words, trailing sharp fingers down her spine. Did he mean to threaten her? Her resolve wavered, but she couldn't go back now. The stakes were too high. As she faced him, the weight of the room pressed down. A million possible futures hung in the balance. The choice was hers, but the risk could cost everything. She felt as if she was balancing on a tightrope, teetering toward revelation or ruin. Each second stretched into eternity as she dared to hold his gaze, ready to uncover the strands of their interconnected fates. Would she confront the truth or retreat to the shadows? The silence was deafening, hanging in the air like a thick fog as Michelle stared into the CEO's cold eyes. She could almost hear her heartbeat, a relentless drum signaling her internal conflict. Every instinct screamed for her to retreat, to shrink back into her comfortable role as the caregiver who kept chaos at bay. But something deeper urged her to stand her ground, to confront what had been gnawing at her conscience. "Do you think you can just sweep this under the rug?" She pressed, her voice firming as she found a sliver of confidence. The eyes that swiveled toward them bore into her with both curiosity and judgment. In that moment, she became more than just a nanny. She was a voice demanding accountability. The CEO's lips twisted into a tight smile, but his eyes remained hard. "You've known your place for years, Michelle. I advise you to remember it," he replied, each word dripped with condescension. But something in his voice, the hint of fear concealed beneath arrogance, activated a pulse of determination within her. Inside, she felt a surge of awareness, a realization that she had been underestimated, not just by him, but by herself all those years. The quiet complexity of her role transformed in her mind. She was not just a caregiver but a protector of innocence, an evident ally to those who needed it most. Her experience navigating familial chaos had gifted her resilience, an ability to thrive under pressure. As the laughter began to rise around her again, Michelle sensed the wavering boundaries of her comfort zone dissolving. She had survived years of emotional turmoil, but this felt different. A revolution sparked within her, igniting latent strengths she hadn't fully acknowledged. The way you treat your employees isn't right. Families suffer because of your choices. It's time for you to consider their lives beyond profit margins, she declared, surprising even herself with the fierceness of her words. His gaze hardened further, but instead of retreating, Michelle pressed on, desperation melting into resolve. The clarity of purpose sharpened her focus. You think you're untouchable, but that's not true. Your power can be challenged. A low murmur rippled through the crowd, curiosity morphing into disbelief. Michelle could see her defiance was igniting something. Was it fear, or was it the beginnings of revolt? A tremor of exhilaration coursed through her body. She was standing on the precipice, no longer in a position of service but becoming an outspoken challenger, taking on the machine she had unknowingly supported for so long, but the thrill of empowerment was quickly tempered by the stark reality of disbelief. What would happen next? With the room's atmosphere thickening, she understood the potential consequences of her stand, the inevitable fallout that could spiral through her life and affect the children she loved. A voice broke through the tension. Michelle, sit down, one of the executives barked, attempting to regain control of the situation. But she stood firm, shaking her head. Her heart raced with equal parts anxiety and adrenaline. She was tired of watching others suffer while she stayed silent, clutching her own fears like a comfort blanket. As her thoughts raced, weighing the enormity of her words, her mind turned to the repercussions. Would she be cast out, her years of dedication erased in one fell swoop? Was she prepared to lose everything, facing not just the CEO, but an entire system built on secrets and deception? Each path loomed before her, and she was caught between two worlds. With a deep breath, she vowed that she would no longer allow fear to dictate her life. A decision was forming, a critical juncture of professional growth and personal resilience. This moment would define her not only in her career but in her identity. And as she looked back at the CEO, there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. Perhaps, she thought, he could be swayed. Perhaps there was a chance to reveal the darker side of his ambition. But who was she to challenge a titan of industry, as she braced herself for the impending confrontation? Michelle realized she could no longer stand idly by. The stakes were higher than she had ever imagined, but for the first time in years, she felt empowered. The gathering storm of her emotions could either drown her or fuel her next move. What would she choose? Would she risk everything in pursuit of truth, or would self-preservation lead her back into the shadows? The next chapter of her life was about to unfold, and she could feel the electrifying tension in the air. In that pivotal moment, she decided to take the plunge, her heart racing as she declared, "The time has come to face the truth." The atmosphere shifted as Michelle's words echoed in the room, leaving a chilling silence behind them. She felt the eyes of her colleagues pivot toward her, a blend of shock and intrigue etched across their faces. In their gazes, she saw familiarity but also something new, or respect, perhaps, or maybe just a glimmer of hope that this moment might shift the balance of power in ways they had long thought impossible. For the first time, she grasped the latent potential of her voice, a weapon forged in years of people-pleasing and silent suffering. "Let us not make a scene, shall we?" The CEO interjected, his tone deceptively casual but laced with warning. He leaned forward, hands clasped tightly as though to metaphorically cage the momentum Michelle had created. "We both know this isn't the right forum for these discussions." On the contrary, Michelle countered, her resolve burning brighter. "This is exactly the forum. The ones sitting in this room need to understand the consequences of complacency. Your actions ripple through families, causing pain. Their lives aren't politicized figures on a balance sheet, they're real, living human beings." Her own heartbeat quickening, Michelle felt the truth of her words permeate through her trepidation. The discomfort she felt moments before transformed into a warm rush of clarity. But as adrenaline coursed through her veins, a question loomed larger than any of her earlier fears: What was she truly willing to risk? She stepped forward, positioning herself closer to the CEO. This isn't just about your company's culture anymore. This is about integrity. It's about standing for what's right, even if it means facing consequences. Each word was punctuated by a pulse of her heartbeat. Every breath resonated the weight of her decision. His expression faltered momentarily, an unguarded flicker of concern crossed his face. But it was quickly masked by a practiced smile, one that signaled his reign was still very much intact. However, Michelle's heart didn't miss the subtle tremor in his eyes. Perhaps, she considered, he wasn't as impervious as he portrayed. The very notion emboldened her further. What happens if you fire me? She challenged, a calculated move spiraling out amid the heightened tension. I'll be forced to seek out better opportunities. People will learn about this. I'll make it my mission to expose your negligence. The words slipped out before she had a chance to weigh them fully. But the urgency felt transformative, steering her presence into dangerous territory where truth mattered more than her safety. Laughter bubbled nervously among other attendees, and Michelle looked around, searching for allies but finding only uncertainty. Their expressions reflected a dance between fear and admiration, her vulnerability exposing their own silent struggles. Could she lead them into some collective reckoning? Or was she meant to walk this path alone? An executive near her, one who had often approached her about the flaws in company ethics, met her gaze with a subtle nod of support. In that instant, she understood her stance was igniting a flicker of courage within them. Each moment spent standing tall solidified her resolve not simply to challenge the status quo but to become a catalyst for something greater. As the CEO's facade of control cracked beneath her insistence, her mind turned to concrete strategies. What did it mean to rally others and create a collective voice? Perhaps reaching out to those affected was the key. A community could wield more power than she ever could alone. She envisioned a network of mothers, fathers, and secret supporters, all unraveling the corporation's deeply woven fabric of disregard. But how to act without exposing herself entirely to the backlash of this domineering CEO? A new determination flared within her, melding ambition and caution into a focused purpose. Michelle moved subtly, gathering her thoughts and mapping out her next steps. This moment, while still fraught with uncertainty, gave her something priceless: clarity. Yet clarity came with its own burdens. Was she prepared for the rollercoaster journey that lay ahead? The air echoed with vindication and danger intertwined, leaving her unsure of the next move. Her hand brushed a business card tucked away in her purse, a contact she had once considered old news but now seemed like a vital lifeline. Cutting off my head, one T silenced the wave of dissent forming beneath the surface, she murmured, losing herself in the possibilities that floated before her. With each passing second, Michelle grasped an exhilarating truth: real transformation often began with a single decisive moment. In that clarity, she readied herself for whatever lay ahead, recognizing this was merely the beginning of her fight. What revelations would await her as she ventured deeper into the labyrinth of corporate resistance? Would her courage inspire others, or would she face the full wrath of those wanting to maintain their grip on power? Michelle stood on the precipice of something larger, an undeniable force forging ahead into the chaos. The time for change was now, and she intended to be at the forefront. Michelle's resolve didn't waver as she stepped away from the suffocating atmosphere of the boardroom. Rather, it intensified. The challenging confrontation had unveiled something deep within her, an unfamiliar but invigorating sense of agency. Each footfall echoed in her mind, signaling momentum she had once thought only reserved for the powerful elite. She glanced at the business card lingering in her purse, tracing her fingers over the embossed name. It belonged to a journalist she had crossed paths with during a less tumultuous time, someone who had once expressed interest in exposing corporate misconduct. In that moment, everything solidified into a singular truth: assembling a team was not just a dream, it was a requirement if she wanted to navigate this precarious tightrope between accountability and retaliation. As she navigated the bustling office corridor, her heart pounded with the rhythm of determination. Each face that scurried past her blurred in her periphery, representing a past version of herself, the compliant worker, the invisible cog in the machinery of corporate complacency. Now, she felt more akin to a disruptive force, one determined to not only uplift herself but to unearth the truth buried beneath layers of secrecy and indifference. Finding her desk, Michelle sank into her chair, pulling up the company's internal directory. Names scrolled past, executives too comfortable in their plush corner offices, junior staff straining under the weight of excessive demands, all connected by the invisible thread of complicity. As the seconds ticked by, she started to brainstorm who might align with her cause, a small army against the oppressive regime of indifference. The woman from HR often raised concerns over staff shortages and burnout. The marketing manager had expressed discontent with the ethically questionable advertising campaigns previously implemented. Even the head of finance, known for his sharp insights, might be a candidate for her vision of reformation. Each name carried a potential story, a tale of frustration she knew could be harvested into a collective narrative. Once she assembled a tentative list, fear cautioned her against making hasty phone calls or sending impulsive emails. And from HR had previously shared her trepidation about even the slightest deviation from the company line. No doubt, she would weigh the risks heavily. Yet there was a chance she could flip that fear into strength. Walking this fine line required a carefully calculated maneuvering of hearts and minds. Drawing a deep breath, Michelle began drafting a series of messages, each tailored to demonstrate her newfound commitment and the vision she hoped to weave together. The message was simple: the time has come to voice our concerns. Together, we can carve a path to a more ethical workplace. The phrase felt rebellious, electric in its implications. An unease washed over her as she attempted to add the concluding line: your silence supports the status quo. Did she want to shake these colleagues out of their inertia, or did she want to inspire them? The tension of her personal transformation towered over her with every keystroke, a stark contrast between her previously genteel demeanor and her emerging resolve. What awaited her was unclear. She could face resistance or even dismissal, but the thrill of the unknown overshadowed her instinct to retreat into the anonymity she had so long inhabited. With each email sent, her heart raced, and that pulse of adrenaline ignited her spirit further. There was a shimmering likelihood that a ripple would expand from these initial drops of connection, but she wrestled with anxiety, wondering if this ambition would ultimately reflect on her in a positive light or revoke a penalty that crushed her efforts. Balancing on the precipice of revolution, she shot a glance out her office window, observing the sprawling city beneath a concrete jungle filled with invisible warriors, each carrying their own unfulfilled dreams. Michelle wasn't just battling for herself anymore, she aimed to rally the struggles. Hidden in plain sight, promising to protect those who dared speak up. The next few days would unfold rapidly, and she sensed an urgency to act. Yet as she prepared for the inevitable pushback, Michelle's gaze returned to the card in her purse. It no longer seemed like a relic but a lifeline. Time to unleash the truth, she whispered to herself, invigorated by a fire she hadn't known existed. What might she uncover when aligning her truth with others? Would she open doors that had long been locked or ignite a chain reaction of corporate accountability? As shadows lengthened on her office wall, her thoughts ricocheted with anticipation and trepidation alike. It was clear this was a critical juncture, the moment where her choices could either cement her resolve or lead to her demise. Michelle was ready. The time had come to act decisively. Who would stand with her, and at what cost? The week ahead conceded no certainty, yet, as she prepared for the next chapter of her fight, she saw the path unfolding, a descent deeper into a battle for integrity, inviting an inevitable confrontation with the very forces she now aimed to destabilize. The week unfolded with a frenetic urgency, stirring anticipation in her chest. Michelle focused on the rhythms of her routine, now imbued with purpose. Each interaction became a potential thread to weave into her tapestry of change. The air buzzed with uncertainty, but instead of retreating, she leaned in, primed to transform potential allies into partners in disruption. By the end of the week, Michelle had crafted tailored pitches, subtly introducing her mission to her chosen colleagues. Text messages flew back and forth, a tentative dance of interest tempered with apprehension. Despite her ambition, the lingering specter of self-doubt loomed large. Would they trust her enough to join her cause? What if they chose silence instead of solidarity? Still, a line had been crossed. She would no longer play a passive role in the unfolding narrative of their workplace. On a Friday afternoon, she gathered the courage to approach and from HR. "Can we talk?" she asked, her heart pounding in her throat. They found a quiet corner, away from prying ears. The conversation began with pleasantries, but as the topic shifted to the recent strain on staff morale, Michelle felt the moment ripe for her revelation. Even as her palms grew slick with sweat, she articulated her concerns about the toxic corporate culture and the need for change, emphasizing her belief that collective voices could forge a path toward improvement. And listened intently, her brows furrowing. "I appreciate your passion, Michelle, but consider the risks. What if we lose our jobs? The weight of that question hung between them, a heavy question that felt tethered to Michelle's desire for change. I understand the fear, Michelle replied, her voice steady despite the trembling inside her. But isn't it scarier to remain silent while everything crumbles around us? We deserve better. The silence that followed felt like a precipice. Anne's gaze softened, a flicker of understanding passing across her features. I'll think about it, she finally conceded. Michelle left that conversation invigorated, yet acutely aware of the reactions that lay ahead over the next few days. More meetings materialized, each dialogue a piece of a growing tapestry. Conversations ignited with the finance chief, who surprisingly shared Michelle's unease about the questionable budget cuts driving dissatisfaction across the board. The marketing manager followed suit, weary of ethically compromised campaigns. Each discussion cracked open their guarded facades, revealing frustrations and aspirations that had simmered beneath surface-level compliance. As the momentum grew, so did the stakes. By Wednesday, Michelle found herself staring at a calendar filled with appointments, each echoing the same challenge: how to nurture this camaraderie into something impactful without attracting the ire of their superiors. Doubts crept in again. Was she simply setting herself up for failure? Yet that doubt was met with resolve. Reinforcing her network became integral to her plan. Late nights became brainstorming sessions over virtual calls, shared documents, late-night coffee. Michelle took the lead in orchestrating a roundtable meeting, a safe space where they could lay bare their grievances and brainstorm actionable solutions. Each minute felt electric with anticipation. The day of the meeting arrived, and anxiety washed over her like a cold wave. The small conference room buzzed with hesitant laughter and tentative smiles. As everyone settled, the chatter faded, and all eyes turned to her. Oddly enough, confidence surged through her. Michelle led the discussion, framing the conversation around common frustrations and the possibility of change. Ideas flowed freely, building a synergy she had scarcely thought possible, yet, just as the wave crested with enthusiasm, a loud knock interrupted them, jolting their focus. The door swung open, and the imposing figure of their VP stepped into the room. Instinctively, the group straightened, tension thickening the air. Michelle's heart raced, the fragile thread they had begun to weave threatened to snap at the first confrontation. What is going on here? He demanded, eyes scanning the assembled faces. The skepticism in his voice cut through the camaraderie like a knife. Resistance flickered within Michelle, and she sensed the coming storm. This moment could either shatter their newfound alliance or cast it into the heroic realm of defiance. Would they stand firm or crumble under scrutiny? The room weighed heavy with unspoken stakes, and as Michelle grappled with the psychological urge to retreat against the instinct to confront, she was faced with a pivotal choice. The fragile bonds of their effort dangled precariously, and the foundation they had begun to build trembled on the edge. Would they sway in fear or galvanize into action? The revelation of their true resolve awaited them, shadows of doubt looming large as the moment crystallized into something transformative. As Michelle stood at the precipice of uncertainty, the words of their VP hung in the air, a declaration laced with menace. It wasn't merely curiosity driving his inquiry, it was power, and Michelle felt it like a chokehold. Could she harness that energy? I was just encouraging the team to share their thoughts on improving morale, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. Each word was a deliberate step across the tightrope, a calculated move to maintain her footing. But the sharp glint in his eye made her heart pound in erratic rhythm. Team building is one thing, but this could easily spiral into insubordination, he replied, the corner of his mouth twitching slightly in amusement, calculating her reaction. It dawned on her how easily the fragility of their gathering could tip into chaos. As she racked her brain for a way to reclaim the narrative, she noticed her colleagues bristling in their seats, their collective anxiety palpable. Each of them was teetering on the edge of two worlds, the safety of silence and the bravery of voicing uncomfortable truths. Was this the moment they would either amplify their resolve or fracture into quiet dissent? Defiance surged within her. We're not aiming for insubordination, she said, her tone taking on an assertive edge. We just want to cultivate an environment where we feel heard and respected. The words echoed in the small room, and for a moment, time hung suspended. Yet instead of the solidarity she sought, she felt the air grow thicker with apprehension. Michelle's eyes shifted to Anne, whose tense expression mirrored doubt. Was her courage undermining their united front? The VP took a step forward, a predator narrowing in on its prey. "And what do you propose? A coup?" he scoffed, voice dripping with sarcasm. It was a mockery designed to isolate her, to undermine her credibility in front of the others. In that instant, Michelle realized this confrontation wasn't simply an obstacle, it was a pivotal moment for her own development. How often had she feared the consequences of speaking her truth? How often had she conformed to expectations, swallowing her insights in exchange for reprieve? The realization struck her with a jolt. The true failure lay not in igniting discord but in remaining silent when she had a voice. "I propose a dialogue," she countered, feigning calm, though her pulse thundered in her ears. "We need to address the core issues affecting our performance, especially if we hope to drive this company forward." A flicker of resolve danced behind her eyes, buoyed by something deeper than fear. It was a commitment to be seen, heard, and valued. Her colleagues shifted in their seats, a subtle shift of collective energy beginning to knit them together in this moment of vulnerability. But the VP remained unmoved, leaning back with a huff of disinterest while his gaze flickered between Michelle and the door, as if contemplating his escape. She could almost hear the gears grinding in the minds of her team. Would they pick up her cue, or sink back into compliance? Every second felt electric, thundering with the potential for either rebellion or complicity. Suddenly, Barbara, the usually reserved finance chief, cleared her throat, her voice trembling yet powerful. "I agree with Michelle. We deserve to be part of this conversation." Others began to nod, a ripple of solidarity taking shape amongst them. Michelle felt the tide shift. The room, once confined by fear, now opened into a collective expanse of possibility. Then the VP cut in, his tone icy. "You realize that stepping out of line can have consequences," he warned, no longer inquiring but threatening, seeking to reignite fear. Michelle locked gazes with Barbara, injecting determination into their silent exchange. "We understand the risks, but we also understand the cost of silence," she said boldly. No turning back now. The stakes had been raised, and the moment teetered on the brink of irrevocable change. It was exhilarating and terrifying in equal measure. A sharp intake of breath from the others signaled both their fear and their determination to stand by her side. The VP's irritation was palpable, his dominance challenged for the first time. Michelle's resolve deepened as she realized her actions could expose hidden strengths not just in herself, but in others too. But how far would they be willing to go now? Would this inciting moment unify them, or would it end in disarray, scattering their resolve? As the tension swirled chaotically around them, Michelle hovered on the edge of transformation, ready to embrace whatever came next, align with her newfound comrades, and confront the shadows lurking in their corporate culture. The VP's next move could escalate this conflict into something far greater than she had planned. Could it galvanize them all, or unravel their fragile alliances? She needed to prepare for the fallout, but more importantly, she had to understand what this moment meant for her individually. What was she truly willing to risk? The hourglass of change had been upended, and as her team faced their own demons, the question loomed large: would they collectively craft a new narrative, or were they on the brink of momentous failure? Michelle clenched her fists, the adrenaline coursing through her veins fueling an unexpected surge of confidence. Her heart raced not just from fear, but from the intoxicating sense of agency she had seized in that moment of confrontation. She was no longer just a participant in the corporate hierarchy, she was a voice, a catalyst for change. As her colleagues stole glances at one another, their expressions morphing from anxiety to tentative resolve, Michelle knew she had cracked open a door that had long remained shut. The VP's threat clung to the air like an acrid smoke, but it only intensified her determination. This was no longer just about morale, it was about empowerment and the courage to speak even when the stakes were high. "Enough of this posturing," Michelle declared, her voice steadying further with each syllable. It was a departure from her usual tone, a step away from the cautious demeanor that had marked her career thus far. "If we want real solutions, we must engage honestly with one another and with you. We cannot thrive under fear." The VP's brow furrowed as he gauged the room. The muted nods and murmurs of agreement from the others were like a lifeline coursing through the atmosphere, transforming it from suffocating to electric. She could feel the shift, the burgeoning spirit of shared purpose. Michelle had initiated a dialogue not just with the team, but within herself. Her mind raced with implications. How had she allowed herself to be swept into complacency for so long? Each complaint she had whispered in the break room felt like a missed opportunity. This moment was both a reckoning and a revelation that the space she was creating was rooted in mutual respect and the desire for real progress. Barbara, emboldened by Michelle's courage, stepped fully into the spotlight. We need to turn our insights into action, not just words. If there are roadblocks standing in our way, we need to identify them together. Roadblocks, the VP echoed, his voice devoid of warmth. Some might call them corporate rules. Sure, Michelle interjected, diving deeper into clarity and resolve. But rules should enable us, not stifle us. And sometimes, breaking them leads to growth. Are you open to that discussion? The VP stiffened, visibly grappling with the challenges being thrown at him. Define growth, he said, tone icy but with a hint of curiosity. Time slowed as she deliberated her next words. They could be a knife or a key. Growth is sharing diverse perspectives to drive innovation. It's allowing us to be part of the solution. Silence enveloped the room, thick with tension, every breath taken with hesitant hope. Michelle felt a mix of vulnerability and strength. She had dared to beckon change into existence, but now she could sense the weight of responsibility pressing upon her. This was the crux of her professional development. Was she prepared for the inevitable backlash? As if reading her thoughts, the VP leaned in, his voice low and calculating. Challenging the status quo can come at a price. Absolutely, Michelle shot back, surprised by her own boldness. But I've often found the greatest rewards lie behind that price. Her words jolted a realization. The essence of leadership was not merely about authority but about being willing to take risks for the sake of others. It was then she knew her journey was just beginning. Michelle glanced around the room, seeking signs of where they stood. The tension hung heavy, but it was accompanied by a glimmer of anticipation among her colleagues. They were ready to shape the future together. The fear was melting away, replaced by a shared desire for progress they had never before embraced. However, challenges loomed dark on the horizon. The VP held a firm grip on the existing structure, and she could almost sense his thoughts racing. How dare she? The competitive edge of corporate culture was also a breeding ground for retaliation, and a counterattack was inevitable. As the meeting reached a breaking point, Michelle sensed a shift within her, a commitment to face whatever consequences might follow. This was not merely about her. Their collective strength depended on pushing boundaries and redefining narratives together. In that moment of raw vulnerability and determination, she could visualize what lay ahead, yet shrouded in uncertainty. The meeting was far from over, and with all eyes on her, Michelle felt an awakening, sparking a question that needed to be answered. Would this newfound strength be enough to withstand any repercussions, and how much further was she willing to take this challenge? As she prepared to confront the fallout awaiting her, the decisive moment was upon them. The real test of their unity and her resolve was just beginning. A heavy silence blanketed the room, pierced only by the distant hum of fluorescent lights. Michelle's heart thudded in her chest, a constant reminder that she stood at the precipice of change. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation, her colleagues inching toward a critical juncture where courage and fear danced together like wary partners. The VP's expression hardened, challenging her to back down, and the room seemed to shrink, those keen eyes fixed on her every movement. Michelle felt the butterflies in her stomach morph into a swarm of relentless determination. She was not willing to surrender her newfound voice. It was time to dismantle the facade of complacency and forge a path, even if it led to backlash. Let us talk about those roadblocks, she prompted, her voice steady, even as uncertainty clawed at her mind. We need to identify fears influencing our choices and then explore how we can overcome them together. Barbara's gaze landed on her, a flicker of admiration crossing her face. It was a small but powerful affirmation, igniting something deeper within Michelle. She was no longer just a cog in the machine, she was shaping the language of resistance that could navigate this corporate labyrinth. The VP stared at her, frustration mingling with incredulity. You think you can define the terms? No, Michelle replied, her conviction blooming like a delphinium breaking through soil. We will define the terms. Together, we can shift the dialogue and establish a new path forward if we face these fears. That's where real innovation begins. Rising to the occasion, she leaned in slightly, daring to challenge not just him but the very constructs that had stifled them all. Every instinct told her to brace for impact, yet the thrill of potential change rooted her solidly in place. Michelle, the VP's voice dripped with condescension, our current structure has served this company well. Do you really believe your way is better? His arrogance felt like a gauntlet thrown before her, and she sensed her colleague's collective breath hitch. The stakes escalated. Yes, I do, she countered, a fire igniting in her belly. The world is changing, and if we don't evolve, we risk becoming obsolete. Gradually, other members of the team began to lean forward, ignited by her resolve. A spark of rebellion flickered through the room. The potential for transformation shimmered on the horizon, but the VP's glare was fixed. You're playing a dangerous game. This could cost you dearly. Change often does come at a price, she acknowledged, her pulse racing. But that's not a reason to shy away from it. Are you really willing to let fear dictate our success? The VP remained silent, the tension devolving into an uncomfortable standoff as the air thickened. His hesitation lingered, and in that moment, Michelle discovered a depth to her resolve she hadn't known existed. Out of the corner of her eye, she caught Barbara's nod of approval, bolstering her courage like an armor-clad invalidation. Yet, should Michelle's confrontation bear fruit in the meeting, she would inevitably draw the ire of someone deeply entrenched in the old ways. A fresh wave of trepidation washed over her. Was she ready to face the fallout? Would her bold choice resonate as a beacon for others or brand her as a target? Internal conflict rippled through her as she juggled the weight of responsibility with her aspirations for change. Each thought wrestled with its counterpart. Should she soften her tone to appease the establishment that made her career, or dig in her heels because evolution winced at comfort? Just as she readied herself to confront the truth of her dual fears, the possibility of alienation and the hope for unity, the VP leaned back, his eyes narrowing. Fine. Let us say this dialogue holds merit. What's the next step? Her heart raced, sensing the fragile thread of opportunity dangling before them all. The next step is defining what's broken and brainstorming concrete actions. It's time to involve everyone in this process, to eliminate that corporate fear together, so it can't hold us back again. But the VP's reaction threatened to splinter their momentary harmony. Regardless of whether the meeting ended constructively or tumultuously, Michelle understood that her confrontation had come with the potential for deeper ramifications. She steeled herself, preparing to unpack not just her own ambitions, but the very crux of their evolving dynamics, the clash of old versus new. Would her resolve echo through the ranks, or would it trigger the wrath of a structure that had long embraced its own stagnation? As the VP opened his mouth to respond, Michelle took a breath, bracing for whatever reckoning awaited them all. The moment of truth was about to unfold, and she was ready to face whatever storm might come. The flicker of a candle on the VP's desk brought an unnatural warmth to the tension-saturated air. Michelle felt both drawn toward the flame and repulsed by its brightness. What if the overhead lights had been dimmed to allow a moment of clarity, a space for reflection among the chaos? The room was alive, and yet, she stood alone in the tempest, clinging to her resolve. Michelle, he finally said, his tone a mix of curiosity and threat, let's assume you're right. What if we seriously consider your proposals? There are consequences to this shift. Are you prepared to handle fallout, both personally and professionally? The question cut deep, it echoed in the hollow chambers of her mind. She weaved through her thoughts, thinking of the late nights she spent wondering whether risking it all was worth it. She considered past compromises and the moments smothered by comfort. What was she truly willing to sacrifice for a future that felt increasingly essential? Consequences are part of growth, she responded, her voice firm but revealing a crack of vulnerability, illuminating deeper layers. I've felt the sting of stagnation personally. I'm ready to lean into the disruption, even if it comes with pain. We all must be pain, isn't the only price, Michelle, he interrupted, rising to pace the short distance between his desk and the door. You could lose respect, support, maybe your position here altogether. The words struck like stone against glass, shimmering with possibilities and dangers. The stakes were laid bare, and the potential risks spiraled into her consciousness. But in the face of his taunts, Michelle's thoughts sharpened. Each insulated jab stirred a previously dormant fierceness within her. She scolded herself for even weighing his implications. Proper respect was built on the foundation of truth and authenticity, not recalcitrance. Maybe respect deserves to be re-evaluated, she said defiantly, meeting his eyes as she fought the rising tide of anxiety. What good is a title or a position if it requires doing the same things in the same ways? That isn't respect, it's complacency. I refuse to accept that. As she spoke, she observed small shifts among her colleagues, a hesitant nod here, a shared glance there. It was as if the very air around them was charged with a new dynamism. Slowly, the concern that had nuanced their expressions began to soften, yielding to seeds of something resembling hope. A shaky intern with no previous experience chimed in. How can we work together on this? I mean, what would it look like if we really looked at the issues head-on? Michelle felt a mixture of awe and gratitude. She wanted to grasp his shoulders and express her admiration, a wordless connection binding them now. Behind closed doors, the culture she long aspired to see bloomed into existence, and it began to take root in each shared conviction among the team. Exactly. She exclaimed, leveraging the excitement of the moment. We redefine the landscape by working through these barriers. No more dismissing our fears. Let us unveil where fear is budding in our projects. Together, we can dismantle each of them. The VP crossed his arms, the fire in Michelle's speech rising uncontainable. And if we unravel something that can't be put back together? He shot back, a hint of challenge lingering in the air. That's the risk we must be willing to take, Michelle replied, a surging conviction pumping through her veins. We might not succeed at fixing everything, but we must start laying the groundwork for transformation. I'll allow for a meeting next week, he conceded, but his eyes flickered with the undercurrent of a brewing storm. But I'm not the only voice in this room. Michelle knew then she had to brace herself, not just against the VP's potential backlash, but against the greater challenge of gathering the same momentum and willingness to confront fears from others. As the meeting adjourned, a flurry of opinions filled the room, each voice exchanges a constant hum. But there remained a gnawing concern in her gut. Barbara's nod had been a catalyst, but an ally was not the same as an advocate. What if her silent supporters were unwilling to transition from whispers of support to outcries for change? Michelle's mind raced with considerations. Yes, they had momentum now, but she felt the impending conviction that she must strategize their next steps carefully, both for herself and her emerging coalition. They stood at the precipice of redefining their professional identities. She needed to uncover the key players in this endeavor, the real changemakers. But could she cultivate that alliance while keeping her own footing secure in the turbulent waters ahead? A looming question danced in her thoughts, as the weight of responsibility pressed down. What would happen if the backlash wasn't just from the VP but came from within her newfound circle? With a flicker of uncertainty, Michelle whispered to herself, "It starts here." It has to. But she wondered if she could harness this moment into a devoted transformation, or was she setting herself up for a fallout? The next steps were critical, and commitment loomed large as an unyielding specter. As the final whispers settled, Michelle felt the air shift again. She had a purpose, but the battle for change demanded a relentless readiness. And she would face it head-on. Michelle stood tall as she exited the meeting room, the weight of what she had initiated settling comfortably on her shoulders. The moment of confrontation had pivoted a once fearful caregiver into a vocal advocate for change. As colleagues filtered out, murmurs of newfound solidarity filled the air, a palpable shift sparking hope amidst the usual corporate weariness. Weeks passed, each day marked by fervent dialogues with her colleagues who had once remained silent. The journey toward transparency and corporate accountability began to take shape. Each meeting, every discussion strengthened the collective bond, turning whispers into grander ambitions. With blueprint charts plastered on conference room walls and collaborative projects now the norm, the unity among her teammates grew deep roots. As they refocused their energies, processes changed, reporting systems tightened, and communication channels expanded. Michelle could see tangible progress reflecting in team morale and elevated employee engagement scores. Outside the corporate walls, the ripple effect began emerging. Reports of their ground-up initiatives reached the ears of stakeholders and, eventually, the press. The journalist on her business card ignited a firestorm, securing interviews and exposing the very faults that had long since laid dormant within the company structure. The publicity was a double-edged sword, illuminating not only the uncomfortable truths within the organization but also the emerging leaders who dared to challenge the status quo. Against the backdrop of media spotlight, Michelle's confidence blossomed. She received recognition at company-wide meetings, no longer silencing herself in the shadows but celebrated as the voice of progress. Her willingness to speak out mandated respect and acknowledgement in ways she had never sought. The narrative was shifting. She had moved from perceived inconsequence to invaluable asset, an integral part of the company's progression into ethical practices. During a particularly spirited employee gathering led by Michelle, she saw the evolution of her colleagues, individuals who had initially teetered on the brink of fear. Their voices united in a powerful chorus of affirmation and resolve, each person reinforcing the fabric of positive change. Each triumph felt monumental. Together, they dismantled oppressive barriers and began to weave a culture of transparency and mutual respect. As summer wound down, the apex of their initiatives culminated in a board meeting where they presented a strategic proposal to incorporate ethics training into company protocols. The stakes were high, yet buoyed by their shared experiences and the cultivation of identity, Michelle stood resolute. "We are not here merely to suggest a pivot," she implored. "We demand accountability, for ourselves and the future of this organization." Her voice was steady, a concrete manifestation of the personal journey she had embarked upon. Surrounded by her allies, she sensed new respect flooding in, both from executives and co-workers. In that moment, she didn't just feel empowered, she was worthy of a seat at the decision-making table. The outcome was celebrated when the board approved the reforms. As her colleagues erupted into cheers around her, a profound realization washed over Michelle. She had accomplished something tangible, a profound change that elevated not just her standing, but the collective dignity of every worker within the firm. Her identity transformed, no longer merely a caretaker but a critical player in redefining their corporate ethos. As she stood there amidst applause, Michelle took a deep breath. She reveled not only in her achievements but also in the knowledge that her courage had driven change. It was her words that had sparked a revolution in ethos. A quiet sense of fulfillment enveloped her. She had witnessed a unity forged from autonomy, determination, and a shared vision for the future. That evening, Michelle reflected on her journey. She had confronted the formidable forces of complacency with grit and heart, carving a path. Not only for herself but for countless others. The company would never be the same. Her peers looked to her as a leader, a beacon illuminating the way forward. This was it, a culmination of effort, self-discovery, and an unwavering will. She had transcended a duality, both a guardian of children and a guardian of integrity within the workforce. In closing that chapter, she opened the door to limitless futures. Now was the time to build upon this new foundation. Together with her allies, Michelle was poised to craft a legacy, not bound to titles or accolades, but anchored in shared humanity, transparency, and accountability for generations to come. And now, it's your turn. You need to subscribe now to the channel to not miss these transformative stories. This is the moment to show your support by leaving a like, feeding the algorithm that strives for connection. Comment below with your reactions and theories about the journey. And don't wait even one more second to share this revelation with at least 5 friends who also crave inspiration and empowerment. Your voice matters.